Our guest today is Executive Director of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. It's easier to say CMAP. He was appointed Executive Director 1 year ago. Prior to joining CMAP, our guest today worked at the United States Department of Transportation. He earned his undergraduate degree, as Dr. Green mentioned, from Governor State University, and received an honorary doctorate from Lewis University for his lifetime commitment to public service. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Szabo. Joe? All right, Joseph, have fun up here.
Well, thank you, Jay, for the kind introduction. Would like to recognize we have, I believe, 7 of the CMAP board members here, and a couple were introduced. Mayor Bennett, who is our chairman, Mayor Tom Weisner from Aurora. But if all of the CMAP board members would stand up, Elliot Hartenstein's here, Rita Athis, our vice chair, Frank Beal, Leanne Redden, who was also mentioned previously, and Peter Scozzi. Any other CMAP board members? And also, there's a CMAP staff member spread out. While we bought a table, we didn't want all the CMAP people sitting together. We wanted to make sure they were spread around a little bit, talking with the folks at the table. But Chief of Staff Melissa Porter's here, along with, I believe, 8 more of our teammates. Would the entire CMAP team stand up, please be recognized? And I also have to mention my oldest sister is here, also named Joe. Don't get started on that. That could take the whole 20 minutes if we talked about all the Joes in the family. But it's really a thrill for me to have the chance to speak today at the City Club of Chicago. I can't think of a better venue than to discuss early efforts for On to 2050, our next comprehensive regional plan, and to discuss priorities for helping our region achieve sustained prosperity. As an international center of commerce, Metropolitan Chicago competes in what is truly a global economy. And we have significant assets, but we also have some very real challenges that have to be addressed. And when I think about our region, 284 communities, 7 counties, 8.5 million people, I'm reminded of the words of John Donne, that no man is an island. No man is an island, entire self. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And I think these words are especially appropriate as we think about just how tightly linked the destinies are for all of our communities in the Chicagoland region. So to help compete successfully, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, or as we say, CMAP, we're working with stakeholders to develop a new long-range plan for our region. Our agency was created by state statute back in 2006 to uphold regional priorities and to coordinate land use and transportation planning. CMAP board serves without compensation, and there's balanced representation with 5 members from the city of Chicago, 5 from suburban Cook, 5 from the collar counties, and it takes a supermajority of 12 to get anything done. So it really is about building consensus across what is a very broad and very diverse region. And for me, it's a thrill to work for this board because you can tell they truly believe in the idea of one region. CMAP's first comprehensive plan was named Go To 2040. Federal law requires that these plans be outward-looking in 30-year increments. And so the first plan was Go To 2040, adopted in October of 2010. And that plan earned a lot of national awards. It really received a high level of recognition across the country. And a key part of it was because CMAP and its partners took implementing the plan just as seriously as developing it. And so it's not just about putting a vision together that sits idly on a shelf. It's about how do we get down to the ground level. CMAP can set the vision, but we're not implementers. It's those 284 communities, it's those 7 counties, It's the 3 transit districts in the RTA, it's IDOT, it's Cook County, it's others that implement. And so a key aspect of our implementation has been what we call our local technical assistance program. And this has allowed us so far to collaborate with local communities on 150 projects that have put recommendations from Go to 2040 to work at the community level. So now 10 years old, CMAP has launched the process of developing our next comprehensive plan, and we call it On to 2050. I wanted to show momentum, kind of keep with the theme of Go to 2040, but show continued momentum. So it's now On to 2050, and that's slated for adoption in October of 2018. So to stress the imperative of acting as one region, today I want to speak about our region's place in the broader national and global context. I'll give you a few data points, talk about the challenges that we face, and I'll tell you what we've heard so far from stakeholders and residents in our extensive On to 2050 outreach over the past 4 months. Now, as some of you might be aware, and if not, you're going to hear, I'm an old rank-and-file train conductor. At 18 years old, hired out, ran commuter trains for the Illinois Central, now Metro Electric, switch boxcars. I know my former assistant, Bob Guy, is here. Bob knows what I'm talking about when I talk about railroads. But in my search for a good analogy to describe the benefits of working together, I thought about my first time riding in the back of a freight train in a caboose. And yes, I hate to admit I'm old enough that I was working out there when there were still cabooses. But it was quite a lesson for me. I was actually with my father. My dad was a 40-year switchman on the IC, and so when I broke in and trained in freight service, my dad was my very first instructor. And I'll never forget being in that caboose with him on the back of this train. We've got almost 100 cars. And when you see a freight train pass through a community over that railroad crossing, your first impression is that, they're big and powerful, as they're efficiently pulling the nation's commerce through town. But my first time in a caboose on the back of that train was anything but smooth, and it taught me a very valuable lesson. From the caboose, you can hear those first cars starting to move in the distance. When a train stopped, the slack is all bunched up together, and so those cars are all tightly together. And so you can hear in the distance, that engine power up, and you start hearing those cars one by one pull out, boom, 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 almost like dominoes toppling down. But you don't actually feel anything in the back of the train, at least not yet. That rumble grows louder and builds up the force until it starts yanking those last cars into motion. And suddenly you realize there's nothing smooth about the force that's about to hit you. And if you don't brace yourself, you're going to get knocked to the floor, just like I was my very first time. And so that's something that I've never forgotten. And so later, serving as a local mayor, I sometimes felt the same phenomena. I might anticipate issues. I might even see them coming in the distance, but would be unable to fully gauge just how that issue is going to affect my community until it hit. And so On to 2050's long-term view is going to help provide that type of perspective. The plan will identify challenges, develop new ideas, and engage communities to create solutions. Last month here at the City Club, David Reifman, the Chicago Commissioner for Planning and Development, spoke. I was here, and he talked about how the city's downtown and neighborhoods depend on one another for both prosperity and quality of life. And our region is just like that too. We thrive best by working together to make our 7 counties more competitive in the global marketplace. And so my challenge to you is this, to think of our 7 counties acting as one region, competing in unison together against the rest of the world, instead of competing individually against each other. Now, our region here in Northeast Illinois is the heart of a broader Midwest mega-region. See the slide up there. And this map was taken from an April 15th op-ed in the New York Times by Parag Khanna. And it describes the series of mega regions from coast to coast here in the United States, and talks about how each mega region unites its cities, its counties, to better compete in the global economy. And Kana wrote this quote, "It's no secret that the country has fallen behind on infrastructure spending, but it's not just a matter of how much is spent on catching up, but on how and where it is spent." And he continued, quote, "Advanced economies in Western Europe and Asia are reorienting themselves around robust urban clusters of advanced industry. Unfortunately, American policymaking remains wedded to an antiquated political structure of 50 distinct states," end of quote. And so to that end, CMAP is joined with our sister metropolitan planning organizations in southeast Wisconsin and northwestern Indiana as part of the Alliance for Regional Development. Our own region here in northeastern Illinois, the CMAP region, is the economic hub of this Midwest megaregion. And of course, we also serve as the freight hub and rail hub of North America. And this transportation network is integral to the health of our megaregion and to our region. The old line in the rail industry was, if the rail network in Chicago catches cold, the nation's economy catches the flu, and it's so true. You know, we are the economic center when it comes to the movement of goods, global goods for North America. Recently, the Alliance hosted a quarterly conversation on transportation at our CMAP headquarters. In addition to the importance of goods movement, it included a discussion on the Midwest Regional Rail Initiative, a 3,000-mile passenger rail system that would provide fast, frequent, and reliable service, linking together the 100 Midwestern cities to Chicago, as we know, the region's major economic center. But taking it down a level, let's get closer to home. For the state of Illinois to thrive, the 7 counties of metropolitan Chicago have to thrive. And so we have to be unified, competing productively together against the other national and global centers of commerce, rather than competing unproductively against each other in the region. Ultimately, it has to be about winning as a team. So I'm a lifelong Cubs fan. You know, if you know me, there's 2 things going to get worked into a speech. A little bit of railroading. The Cubs are somehow going to make it in there. But as a lifelong Cub fan, there's something that I really love about watching Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant compete against each other. You know, statistically, they're going back and forth. They compete vigorously to try and lead the team in home runs and RBIs. It's friendly competition. But most important is, at the end of the day, they have each other's backs. The team comes first. Together, they're in it to win it. And this breeds the highest level of success. And so as a region, yeah, it's good to compete with each other. It's healthy, but we need to stop poaching businesses from one municipality to another and considering it economic development. Now, don't get me wrong. A business's needs are going to change over time, and so they certainly may need to relocate. And if they do, it's very important that we work to keep them in the region as they seek a new location. So that is a good thing. It's an important thing. But we have to understand this is only maintaining the status quo. And so by making sure that we're joining forces in selling the region first and collaborating across local jurisdictions, by viewing ourselves as one team and using our comprehensive plans, adopted goals, we can attract real economic growth. By carefully prioritizing public investments and policies, we can ensure the region prospers with enviable quality of life for all of us. So on to 2050, we'll build on Go to 2040 by emphasizing reinvestment to strengthen existing communities and to leverage regional assets, including our system of roads, transit, and freight that badly need maintenance and modernization. So let's talk about a few metrics. CMAP is known amongst policy wonks as an agency that generates volumes of data and analysis, including demographics and economic factors such as industry clusters and taxes. Crane Chicago Business frequently uses our policy updates on these topics. And so what I want to do is to get into just a few nuggets of some of our data to punctuate the real need for acting as one region. Today at your places, you received a copy of a new Onto 2050 Snapshot Report about the region's economy. And measured by gross regional product since 2002, our growth is lagging behind peers such as Boston, Los Angeles, New York, and Washington. Now, we've grown since 2009, that's the good news, but we're not growing nearly as far or as fast as our peers. On a more positive note, our region's workforce has grown proportionately faster than our peer regions. And so this is a sign that our pool of available labor is gaining strength, but ironically, this now contributes to a higher unemployment rate as more workers seek employment in what they perceive to be a stronger economy. But here's the real sobering fact. Our region's economy is leaving too many communities behind, and leaving those communities behind ends up being an economic drag on growth for all of us. The unemployment rate among African Americans is more than double the regional rate, and this costs us all. It costs us all economically, and it includes consequences such as an appalling homicide rate. And so planning to ensure that all of our communities achieve economic stability has to be a heart and soul issue for the entire region. And it's in each one of our own economic interest. To make effective choices as a region, CMAP has begun producing a series of data-driven snapshot reports and strategy papers. These are an honest assessment of the region. They're not gloom and doom. They're not rose-colored glasses. They're the facts. They're the facts as we know them, so we can help set clear priorities for the future. So today, after 4 months of intensive outreach, we've issued a draft report for public comment entitled Emerging Priorities for Onto 2050. And so far, we've had more than 100 of workshops conducted across the region since early March. We're still going out and doing workshops. We've had an online survey. Nearly 7,000 stakeholders so far have provided their thoughts about the most important regional challenges and potential solutions. And so let me summarize what they've told us. For the region's economy, as I mentioned at the opening, our strong infrastructure connections creates this hub for goods movement on a local, national, and international scale, and an estimated $1.3 trillion in goods moves into and out of the region each year. But stakeholders, what we heard from them, they cited numerous negative perceptions of Illinois and its business climate, the lack of a state budget, concerns about governmental efficiency, our slow recovery from the recession were all frequently mentioned. Renewed infrastructure investment and stronger coordination amongst the counties and municipalities and civic organizations were among the many solutions that participants offered. And I'm glad that Chris Lawson is here and Larry Walsh and Mike Jasso from Cook County. I've watched the county board chairs come together along with Steve Koch from the city of Chicago, and you can see a real effort coming together and gelling in the desire to work together, as a single unit of economic growth. And the power when those 7, the 8 including the city, come together, it's immense. And we had a tremendous success on this 6-7 months ago when we were working on the FAST Act provisions. When those 7 county board chairs in the city of Chicago signed a letter on a core set of principles, we sent them to the congressional delegation here in the state of Illinois. They were amazed to see this diverse cast of characters together, from the most liberal to the most ultra-conservative, agreeing on a set of principles. And they were so impressed that our Illinois delegation, on a bipartisan basis, set those principles to their leadership that were negotiating the bill, and we were successful getting those provisions in the bill. And so when those 8 come together, they're actually speaking on behalf of 70% of the population of this state, and it's immense power. Inclusive growth. This is a big topic. Stakeholders told us they want fewer barriers between communities, better access to long-term, well-paid jobs, and strategic investments in excluded communities. And as I said, this is an important point. The National Equity Atlas has estimated that the Chicago region's gross domestic product would have been $130 million higher in 2012. That's a 20% increase if there were no racial gaps in income and employment. Research shows that regions with higher inclusion enjoy greater economic success and longer periods of growth. And so when you take a look at our lagging economy, if you want to accelerate it, if you want to generate that 20% increase in gross domestic product, ensuring inclusive growth across our entire region is fundamental. Transportation network. I've indicated several points in the talk about how important it is. And there's an old fundamental adage that I like to use my time at USDOT. It's a fact that no economy can ever grow any faster than its transportation network is going to carry it. And so our system here has to be in good condition to support commutes and the movement of goods. We heard strong concerns about congestion and overall condition of the region's transportation system. This is our most critical asset, but it's falling behind other industrialized parts of the world. We've heard strong consensus for the need to increase transportation funding across all modes, particularly in transit, bikes, walkability, and freight. Stakeholders say they want innovative, multimodal options to provide a transportation system that's safe and targets investment towards congested areas. Reinvestment in infill, reinvesting in the region's existing communities to help revitalize economically depressed areas, something that we heard. It facilitates the new growth without building costly new infrastructure, and it preserves limited natural resources. Feedback indicated a strong desire for reinvestment, especially near existing bus and rail transit stations and downtowns and in underutilized and disinvested areas. Housing choice. Although the region's housing stock has become more diverse since 2000, public input affirms that housing affordability still needs to be improved. We need to ensure an adequate housing options for all residents at all stages of life. And many stakeholders express concerns about being priced out of their desired home. Others cited a general lack of housing choices for seniors and middle-income residents with affordable options too far from employment options. Conservation and climate change. Stakeholders are concerned about depletion of natural resources and call for action to protect the region's lakes, streams, groundwater, and watersheds. And despite a trend towards infill development, irreplaceable natural and agricultural lands at the region's edge are still being consumed, primarily for residential subdivisions. And these development patterns are especially costly for taxpayers because they require new infrastructure for transportation, sewer, water, and schools. We also heard about flooding and other climate change impacts, an increase in extreme temperatures and severe storms. And so stakeholders have called for more resilient approaches to avoiding major transportation and utility disruptions and damage to property. Stakeholders expressed concern over government inefficiencies, overlapping responsibilities, and duplication of services by different governments. Metropolitan Chicago has 1,400 units of local government, more than any U.S. region, and many municipalities are currently under stress due to both local structural issues and, of course, the state's fiscal crisis. So we heard calls for greater collaboration, more sharing of services by municipalities, and government consolidation. So this is what we've heard over the past 4 months. And when I think about where we stand today, I'm reminded of an old German proverb that says, necessity unites. And I think it's especially pertinent at this moment in time. We've got tremendous assets, but we face challenges that are very real, and in many respects, we're at a fork in the road. But by working together, we can get on track. There we go. Get the railroads back in there. We can work in unison, make certain that we achieve optimal results. This certainly isn't. Together, we can make sure the pieces all fit together. We have significant assets. And that's the one thing that, when I hear some people talking gloom and doom, and believe me, I'm not dismissing the reality of our challenges, but what heartens me is the assets that we have here in our region, our municipalities, our transportation infrastructure, our natural resources, and above all, our people. And these are the assets that have served us well over the course of our history here. It's what has allowed our region to become established and to grow and to thrive. These are the very assets that made Chicagoland the economic hub of the Midwest and the transportation hub of North America. But these assets cannot be neglected. They have to be valued. They have to be cultivated. They have to be maintained and enhanced. It's the path forward. So as we continue through what will be a 3-year process to develop onto 2050, this input, this frame of reference, will continue to inform our work. And by ensuring that all of the investments are made as wisely and equitably as possible, we can maximize their benefits to lift up all of our communities and benefit the region as a whole. As I said at the beginning, no man is an island, no community succeeds alone. In the words of Bruce Springsteen, ultimately, no one wins unless everybody wins. Thank you very much.
Well, we have some questions. Some predate the speech, which shows you how important they are. Amanda, there's her entrance right there. She has her entrance. And young Caitlin over there, so you raise your hand. The professor will save his question for last, because it might turn into a bit rowdy with a couple of county board chairmen here. I don't want to. Melanie Moore, EOC. How does climate change influence the Go to 2050 plan? Probably some of us remember when it was 2000, but that's...
So as we took a look at the Go to 2040 plan and took a look at how we were going to springboard to the On to 2050 plan, one of the areas that was clear of where we needed to make a stronger statement and do deeper work was in the area of climate change and resiliency. There's just no question over the past decade that for whatever reason, we've seen a rapid change in weather patterns, and they've had significant impacts on our transportation infrastructure and our utilities. And so when you start taking a look from a 2050 frame of view, it's just fundamental that we're going to have to become much more deeply engaged in this issue.
Okay. Leighton Olson, what is the future of CMAP and FEMA cooperation in the 20-county 9/11 region of southeast Wisconsin, northeast Illinois, and northwest Indiana? Simple question.
So I'm not sure I get the question in context of FEMA, but I do think that the continued work with our peer MPOs in Wisconsin, southeast Wisconsin, northwest Indiana, and we also include in our work, meet quarterly, not only with those two, but also with Michigan, and make sure that there's a clear understanding of what we're doing, how those pieces fit together. And of course, these are some of the things that we're exploring a little more deeply in our work with the Alliance for Regional Growth.
Okay. Alberto Ortega, acronyms are killing me. You could pronounce that. SODEXO USA. Sodexo? Close enough? All right. Global companies promote diversity inclusion as a competitive advantage. How can the region promote diversity inclusion to grow the economy?
So back to the first answer that I gave when we were talking about climate change. Again, as we took a look at the 2040 plan, which was a strong award-winning document, and started taking a look at where we need to continue to refine our work in 2050, the issue of inclusive growth and inclusion was critical. As I touched on in my speech, it's actually the cause of our economic lag. And by ensuring that we have an inclusive region, all of us will better economically prosper and have a higher quality of life. And so it is, the whole issue of inclusion is fundamental to our work in an area that we have to continue to advance.
Okay, this is right up your alley. Kay Whitlock, where are you, Kay? There she is. Christopher B. Burke, and something else. I can't. Cubs, Blackhawks, Bears, Sky. Obviously, you're not a South Sider. Mayor, you caught that, right? Question. What do our sports teams do to our region's economy?
I don't know that as an agency that we have good analysis on that. To speak factually what the financial impact is, I don't think there's any question, at least when they're winning, it's an important part of the civic culture. I mean, I will say this, for me personally, I'm a lifelong Chicagoan other than the previous 6 years that I spent out in D.C., and I knew I was coming home. Most people, they finish a gig like that in Washington, they stay put and make lots of money. And for me, it was always about coming home to Chicago. This is home. And it's not just that I love this region, the city, the lakefront, but for me, a huge part of it is, the sports teams. Mayor, I even love the White Sox. I do.
The old professor's memory isn't always right, but I think we had, was it when we had Rocky here about the Blackhawks, every Stanley Cup game, like $175,000 in taxes go. It's really in the interest of the region to have these teams win. Forget all the other BS. Okay. This is from Blair Harvey, Public Health Institute of Metro Chicago. I'll read it because it's a good question, but we keep rules here. We printed a whole hell of a lot of these. Here we go. Good question. How will your 2050 plan align with Healthy Chicago 2.0, the city's plan for improving health in Chicago?
So I don't have a direct answer on that, other than a review of these types of plans are always critical to our work. Normally what you'll find is our work is up on a higher level, and then I talked about earlier the 284 communities, implement. That includes the city of Chicago. Obviously, they're a huge player. But, our role is to set that broad vision and then to make sure we're providing the assistance that we can to the 284 communities to implement their local goals in concert with the broader vision. But obviously, the health of residents, right, that's fundamental to quality of life.
Okay, next to last question, John Wirtz, Jacobs. Is that the old consulting firm? Jacobs? Really? I interviewed the original. Oh, gee, forget about it. Really important man in Chicago history. Really important. And if I could remember it, I would probably say it. All right, this is the usual question you get when you have a topic like this. They always throw this up there. The Minneapolis region is known for tax revenue sharing, allegedly. When employers relocate, is CMAP working in similar agreements with local agencies to mitigate job poaching?
Yes, and I talked about that in the remarks. Two things. First off, I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about the Minneapolis region. I know MPC, Peter, has one of their Think and Drink forums coming up. Is it next week? Is it sold out yet? 14th. So that's July 14th at the MPC website, and the topic is about the Minneapolis region and about the very impressive rate of growth that they have had. But when it comes to tax policy, this is an area where we do a lot of analysis and intend to do further analysis. Every tax that you have, there are effects and consequences, and you have to have taxes, but it's a matter of how do you have the right taxes at the right levels to understand what are the cause and effects of each one of these to make sure that you're enhancing economic growth rather than hindering it. And so this is an area where we've done a lot of work, intend to continue to do a lot of work, and continue to share our policy updates with the public to try and affect public opinion.
Is Orfield coming up? No, good, and I won't be there then. He swore at me on television because I told him he didn't know what he was talking about. A long time ago, Kelly, when your professor was a lot more aggressive. My question, anytime you hear the word stakeholders, you got to know how to spell it. Often when you talk about stakeholders, when you talk about the revenue to support it, they become hamburger holders. All these wonderful things you mentioned, who's going to put up the money?
It's one of the most important reasons why we believe in prioritizing the investments that get made on a very clear set of criteria. So there's transparency to the residents. They know what they're getting. They know for every penny that we're investing that it's generating the most optimal returns in dividends. And when you do this, when it's clear to the public what they're getting, they are more willing to pay. The truth of the matter is, the stalemate in Springfield may really accelerate this issue here in our region. But you take a look around the country, you take a look at a lot of the work that Brookings has done, the regions that have pulled together and essentially utilized self-help have been the ones that have grown the most aggressively over the last several years. And so while I always believe that there should be a state and federal role, the truth of the matter is that we need to likely take a much stronger look at self-help and control our own destinies.
Great answer. How about a round of applause for our